Hey everybody, we're at Proverbs 13:24 today. You probably know this one. Whoever spares the rod hates his son, but whoever loves him is diligent to discipline him. Whoever spares the rod hates his son, but he who loves him is diligent to discipline him. This is a classic proverb about child rearing, parenthood, and we sometimes shorten it to spare the rod, spoil the child, and that's absolutely right. Parenthood in the Bible is all about raising up godly men and women. Malachi 2:15 says that God ordained marriage, among other reasons, that he might produce godly offspring. He ordained the mother and the father to raise this kid to be not just a productive member of society, not just a happy person, but a godly one, to live out the best of what he could be for the glory of the Lord. That's the purpose of parenthood. And so to that end, we are constantly teaching and training our children. We're teaching them their ABCs. We're teaching them to walk. We're teaching them how to play sports. We're teaching them how to balance a checkbook, right? And along the way, that involves a lot of correction and a lot of discipline. And discipline maybe is a bad word in some circles. Not in ours, I shouldn't think. But, there are folks that think you shouldn't discipline your children. And this is a very different idea that the world has about parenting. There are those that say parenting is all about letting the child free, right? You've got to let them explore, let them experiment, let them find who they are and be that. And your job as a parent is really just to step out of the way and empower and enable them. But here's the problem. Children, when they're born, lack the requisite wisdom and skill to effectively do that. When they're just born, when they grow up, even when they're little, even as they're teenagers, they don't even know who they are yet. And you know this if you've gone past that stage in life. I didn't know anything at that point. So how am I supposed to find who I am? And I found in a lot of cases the people that say that either are very creative people themselves, that's kind of how they think, or maybe they're very young, they just have one or two children maybe, and they are still feeling that themselves, that they've got to find who they are. But I would say that is a very late stage thing in parenting. That's something you want to do after you've given them the basics, right? Don't lie, show up on time, work hard, etc. In any endeavor, whether it's creative or athletic or business, you've got to learn the basics before you can go beyond and experiment for yourself, because you don't have the requisite skill or knowledge, which is what parents are there to give through discipline. That's what we're there for. And the Bible uses this term here, the rod. And we react to that, right? Talking about corporal punishment. And the thought for most of us of beating our child with a rod is horrifying. But let's just back off a little bit here. The Bible is very clear that you are not to abuse your children. When he says term like the rod, he's not talking about beating them until they're bleeding or until they're broken or until, that they're scared of you or something like that. But there is some value in corporal punishment. And maybe you're not going to like me for that. Maybe you're going to get on me for it. But this is what you're doing through corporal punishment, through spanking, through whatever it is, usually just the slap on the rump or whatever it is, which does not really hurt them, as you know. It hurts in the moment, but they're fine a minute later. They get hit on the head and things like that a million times a day, climbing trees and whatever. But the point is to associate in the mind of the child pain with something that is wrong. Rebellion, lies, disrespect. That they need to learn that those kind of things produce an immediate and painful reaction. That's an important lesson to have. If you grow up knowing that lies lead to pain, or rebellion leads to pain, or disobedience or disrespect leads to pain, then that's not a bad lesson to have. And this is all supposed to be out of love. I tell people in premarital counseling all the time, you never spank or discipline a child out of anger because you're so mad and you've got to get back at that. No, that's the time you need to back off and maybe let your wife or your husband handle it, or maybe just let that one slide because you can't do it effectively. This is about training the child through love. And when it's over, if you maybe correct your child, maybe you have to spank them, maybe not, maybe you just have to speak strongly, and then there's a big embrace and I love you, mommy, I love you, it's fine. It's okay. That's what we're there to do. And there are those who reject that and say there's no reason to ever strike a child, and they're usually thinking of some horrible thing they saw on, some documentary somewhere. And I'd say that most people that are opposed to spanking, in my experience, have never experienced it personally. But I will say this. The Bible doesn't say that you have to spank your child, but you better have something else to take the place of that. This does not mean you can just let them go. And there are people that want to try and explain things to their child. Hey, that's great too. 2-year-old doesn't care. I'm going to explain why you did what was wrong. That 2-year-old child, if you've got a willful child, is not going to listen to you. That works better when they're 11, 12, and they're starting to use their brains a little bit more. You got to have something else, whether you're doing your timeouts, whether you're doing removing privileges, whatever. You better have something that works, because you're trying to provide consequences for a child at a young age so that they don't have to learn that when they get older. Because you don't put them in timeout when they're 2. When they're 22, society will put them in a timeout called prison if they can't control themselves, or they'll lose their job, or they'll get kicked out of school. And then they're going to come home mad at you, wondering why is this going on? And you're going to have to say, well, I guess I didn't teach them the way that I should. And if you ask me, we've run the experiment on not disciplining children and not providing consequences, letting them do whatever they're going to do. And that experiment has failed, as I think we can see that we have many instances I have encountered of adults, grown men and women, who come to me and say, I should have learned all this stuff from my parents. They never taught me this. And they said they wanted me to find it on my own, but now I'm 30 and I don't know how to live life because we're too afraid to step in. True parental love is willing to even hurt their child's feelings and even physically for a short while to teach them a greater lesson out of love. And Solomon says here that if you don't do that to your child, you hate your child. There are some people that treat their children like accessories. Sometimes this has been maybe older parents where they don't have a child until they're in their 30s or something like that. Not all, just things I've noticed. Maybe they're very involved in social media and their child is like a prop that they have. And so they don't properly discipline the child because they're trying to get certain reactions out of them, and the child is kind of there in the background rather than treating them like a whole person. Or maybe you just want to be friends with your kids. I'm friends with my kids. I'm friends with my parents. But again, that's something that comes later. Early on, you've got to recognize it is a different relationship that a father has to a son or a mother to her daughter, whatever it is. And then you need to be a parent to them, not just a friend. You be friends later. I promise you will be if you do this right. Or you treat your child like some kind of social experiment. And there's all kinds of people that do this. I'm going to raise one child this way and do one kid that way. Or this is the cause that I'm really excited about, so I'm going to try out all these techniques on my kid. That's sick. Don't do that. That's a person. That's your kid. Love them well, discipline them, train them well. And I'd say young men especially need stern discipline. And then you might say, well, they get all angry at me. Yeah, of course they get angry in the moment, but they're going to thank you for it later. They will thank you when you have taught them to be disciplined, and all their friends that didn't get disciplined, who they envied when they were 8 and 9, now they're out of control. And you're like, you know what, Dad? Thank you for not letting me run off and be crazy like that other guy. This is how God deals with us. Hebrews chapter 12 says that our fathers disciplined us for a short time as it seemed best to them, but God disciplines us for our good, that we may share his holiness. God is willing to train you. Sometimes he's even willing to break us in order to make us righteous. So we ought to be willing to do right by our children, to train them to succeed, to train them to be righteous and holy, to be able to function in society, right? Don't have to get your responsibility. It's not love just to let your kid do their own thing and try to figure out who they are. It's your job to help them, to show them. Show your son what it means to be a man. Show your daughter what it means to be a woman, and lead them and discipline and train them in that way. And whether that's corporal punishment or not, you need to do it. And let me throw in one last thing, and I realize this is ironic because I'm putting this on YouTube, but I am a pastor. I am a father of 4. Don't take your parenting advice from weird blogs, from people that you've never met that are really slick, but they're also trying to sell you face cream and stuff like that. You get your advice from the Word of God and from the people of God. This is what the church is for. And those of you who are older in the church, be available to the young parents and show them how it ought to be done. God bless you guys. We'll see you next time.